Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Top Gun Maverick. Let's talk about it. So Top Gun Maverick is the sequel to 1986's Top Gun that was directed by Tony Scott, and this sequel, 30 years on, is directed by Joseph Kosinski and stars none other than Thomas Cruise. None other than Thomas Cruise, who is back at it again with his plane antics. Now, going into this movie, I didn't really know quite what to expect. I had heard that it had been getting some great reviews, some glowing reviews, although I hadn't actually seen the reviews myself because I didn't want them to influence my thoughts on this movie. I really was going in blind because I haven't seen the first Top Gun movie, and I don't plan to. It's not exactly my bread and butter, okay? But I have to say, after having watched this film, what a journey, like what an absolute spectacle. We are going to be going through my thoughts on this movie, the plot, you know, Thomas Cruise's acting, and of course the aerial sequences that we see here. But before we get into all of that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. And also be sure to follow me on Twitter. Now, without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on Top Gun Maverick. Now, as I mentioned before, I have not watched the first Top Gun movie. I did plan on watching it before going into this one, but then I was mostly distracted this week by trying to catch up with the entirety of Stranger Things. All 3 seasons of Stranger Things, which I have been tweeting about actually, but yeah, that's what I was focused on this week, okay? And I have managed to do so, by the way, so I am looking forward to reviewing Stranger Things season 4. But anywho, that's one of the reasons why I couldn't find time to watch the first Top Gun movie, so I really did go into this sequel blind. But because this is one of the most iconic American movies, it's certainly one of the most iconic roles that Thomas Cruise has ever played, and it's something that is very much part of the pop culture consciousness. I am familiar with some of the iconography. I was very familiar with the score, you know, the original theme for Top Gun, so I was surprised to see how many of these, you know, the iconography and the kind of storyline that I was familiar with despite never having seen the film. And I felt like that really helped me follow along with the story, as well as of course the way that the sequel was written plot wise, that allows you to kind of catch up with things and be aware of what's going on even if you haven't watched the first one. I will dive into the plot a little bit more in a second, but I did just want to touch on the intense 80s nostalgia that is seeped into this film. I do feel like the 80s are still making a comeback. I feel like that comeback has lasted now for at least 5 to 6 years. Speaking of Stranger Things, that was definitely a part of that movement in pop culture that we saw in the 2010s, and it's still continuing on with films like Top Gun Maverick. I definitely think that films like this and media like this act as a sort of cozy blanket to some elder generations who might look back at these times as, you know, simpler times, especially in the context of the last 2 years that have been happening, the disaster that they've been. I definitely feel like some people might watch a film like this and just feel a little bit cozy and nostalgic and like to reminisce about the memories, especially if they grew up watching the first Top Gun. But there's something about the way this film merges that kind of 80s nostalgia but also embraces modernity. It also embraces progress in a way that creates this really cool hybrid that makes it feel, you know, nice and nostalgic and comfortable, especially for people who grew up in that time, but also accessible to younger generations as well, especially through the technology and the action sequences that we see here. It definitely helps bring it straight to 2022. And another thing that I really appreciate about this film is that at its core, it's very simple. It's not overly complex. The story could apply to a film back in the 80s as well as it could for a film today. And here the plot is that we have Maverick, who's played by Thomas Cruise once again. You know, Maverick is this, you know, legendary pilot. He's in the Navy. Okay, first of all, guys, I'm not a military armed forces person. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second, but yeah, I'm not a military armed forces girly, so I don't know my divisions like that, but I thought the Navy was both. I thought, for some reason in my mind, I thought the Navy did like the boating, like I thought they worked with the I thought they worked with the ship. Like, why are we dealing? I thought that was the Air Force's job. I didn't realize there was so much overlap, okay? But anyways, so he's in the Navy, but he's on these like aerial crafts, like these airplanes. And so he's this like well-renowned pilot who loves piloting. But unfortunately, he has reached the end of his career. There are certain movements, you know, in technology that make people like him redundant at this point, especially with like self-driving aircrafts, I guess. There are some of the higher ups that are looking at him like he's a fossil. He's no longer necessary, and they need to move him along and make room for the newer technology that they can take advantage of, this technology that doesn't have the same human faults as someone like Maverick does. But of course, whenever you have a plot that is centered on technology versus humanity, humanity is always going to win out, and Thomas Cruise is on the side of humanity, and he represents people who have these instincts that are born of experience and passion and love for what they do. He is representing that side of the argument, and he does so exceptionally because he is truly the best at what he does. He is literally the best in the field. He's the best in the skies, okay? There's no one who can top him. So the idea that he can be replaced by a machine or an algorithm is laughable when you can see what he is capable of and how, you know, years and years of training and experience have shaped him to be the very best at what he does. Not only that, but having this human intuition and these human characteristics that can't be replicated in an android or in an algorithm or whatever means that he is able to make these snap decisions, these key decisions in emergency situations that could literally be the difference between life or death. Now, fortunately for Maverick, he still has one guy on his side in the Navy, and that is Iceman, who is of course Val Kilmer from the first movie. I think they were adversaries in the first film, and then they became friends, like they made up and became besties. I think that's what happened, but again, I haven't watched the first film. Anyways, but yeah, Iceman has had his back, you know, and all those times that he's met setbacks after setbacks in his career, he should be an admiral, he should be this and that because of just how, you know, well established he is here, but he's not, and he's just been focusing on his flying. You know, all of those times he's had his friend Iceman to back him, and that's one of the main reasons why instead of being fired for disobeying orders over and over again, he is instead given this job to teach this young group of elite flyers to go on this almost impossible mission to take down this like underground bunker of, you know, uranium or all sorts of nuclear products or whatever. And to do so, they have to be taught by the very, very best, because otherwise they will not be prepared for this suicide mission. And I also like the fact that, you know, this is a very specific area of expertise, and clearly I am, you know, out of my depths here. Like clearly Jean is not an expert on the Navy or the Air Force or like she doesn't know what she's talking about, okay? So I like the fact that this film takes its time to really explain what's going on. It seems really reliable. It seems like it knew what it was talking about, but at the same time it knew how to convey that information to the audience, basically dumbing it down so that we could understand and we could really get a sense of how dangerous this impossible mission was. I think they did a great job of using technology, these graphics and simulations, to show how impossible the mission would be, and also to show us the pilot's progress, you know, as they tried different exercises to mimic what it would be like in real life. That was really, really helpful. And then in the end, when you do see the real life mission, you understand each step that they had to take because it was part of the exercises, and we understand the stakes involved here because that was something that was stressed again whilst they were being taught, and we got to see the graphics and got to see the actual consequences should they miss even one beat in the real mission. Now, speaking of the mission itself, I couldn't help but notice that they tried to be as vague as possible about where this underground nuclear bunker was. They weren't about to name any country. They kept it as vague as possible. All they said was it was violating NATO treaties. So all already, like, if you've been following the news, you'd be like, I think I know what's going on here. But yeah, they try to keep it as vague as possible, and I do feel like this kind of plays into the undertones or even overtones that we see in this film, which are very much, you know, military based. It can be seen as military propaganda, let's be real. It's very patriotic, it's very machismo, it's very Americana. So yeah, that's something that was obviously, you know, quite prevalent in the first Top Gun movie, and I'm not expecting it to have completely disappeared in the sequel either. It's very much still there, and I do feel like they do a decent job of modernizing it, making it more palatable for a wider range of audiences. But I'm not blind to the propaganda, like I can see it, okay? I do think that if you're someone who is completely against this kind of filmmaking and this kind of, you know, jingoistic propaganda, then it won't sit right with you no matter how good the film is. Like, the messaging will be so overt that you'll kind of roll your eyes the whole time. But the way I see it is that I don't buy into the messaging. I'm not going to allow myself to be brainwashed by it. I can appreciate the quality of the filmmaking, the plot, you know, the well articulated story for what it is, without allowing the, you know, overt messaging to sway me one way or the other. But that is why it's so important to point it out, and that's why it's so important to be cognizant of it. Now, I will say one of the main reasons why that military propaganda goes down so easily is because they did add a little bit of sugar to that medicine, okay? And that sugar was, of course, Thomas Cruise. Thomas Cruise is at the center of this story. I mean, what can I say? What can be said about Thomas Cruise, okay? In terms of his professional career, we don't need to talk about the personal stuff. In terms of his professional career, guys, like, I can't think of a harder working actor. Can you? Like, truly just, I'm trying to think, but I can't come up with anyone, because my guy, even by his own admission, is always working. He even recently said that his break is when he goes on press tours. Like, can you imagine? Actors are always complaining about press tours, and he was like, no, that's my holiday. Wild, okay? Now, at this point, Tom Cruise is known for his wild stunts. He's known for pushing the envelope, for doing what literally no one else wants to do. Literally, like, people make jokes about him trying to kill himself on set, you know, with these crazy stunts that he does. But I truly think it comes from a place of wanting to, yeah, like, push the envelope, do something that no one else has ever done on screen. That urge and that passion that he has to bring a spectacle to the audience is something that I will always appreciate, and it is something that people gravitate towards his films for. You know, that's one of the main reasons why we check out the Mission Impossible films, is to see what crazy stunt that Thomas Cruise has come up with this time around. No one is coming out of a Mission Impossible movie like, oh yes, that plot was very thought-provoking. Like, oh, the screenplay was interesting and it contrasted again. Like, no one cares, okay? We're here for the action sequences. We're here to see what crazy stunts Thomas Cruise has gotten up to this time around, what bone on his body he has broken, okay? And he delivers each and every time. It's crazy. And this time around we have a different dynamic, because here he is a pilot, so we have all of these incredible action sequences that take place in the air. We'll talk about them in a second, but I do feel like when it comes to Tom Cruise's portrayal of this character and his acting, he convinces us that this is someone who has been doing this for 30 plus years. He loves what he does, and he is a pro. Not only is he a pro, but he's the best in the world. One of my favorite parts of this movie is when they're all talking about how impossible it is, and you have John Hamm who's like, oh, it's impossible, I'm going to be teaching you now, and you're going to have a you know, longer time to get in and out. Obviously that raises the danger. You're going to have, you know, more altitude or less altitude, I can't remember. Basically he was putting them more in danger, even though it sounded like a safer plan, because he had basically dismissed Maverick's plan as, you know, being impossible. No one had been able to carry it out. And then you have, you know, this like announcement that a plane had been taken, and none other than Maverick is completing the entire course by himself, and he proves to the whole gang that it can be done, that it is possible. And at that point John Hamm has to just like throw his hands up and say, okay, well, what can I possibly do? Like literally, all he could do is bow, because what he did was show the team that, you know, what they were working towards was achievable if they could just believe in themselves and they could work really, really hard to get there. And of course, the risk was still very high, but the idea that Maverick didn't allow himself to just be like a backseat driver, like he really went out there and pushed himself to show these other pilots that it could be done, was really inspiring. Like, can you imagine? That is so inspiring. And I feel like that speaks to a little bit of Tom Cruise's character, or at least his persona, where he is willing to do all of these stunts himself. You know, it's not like he's just leaning on stuntmen to do the stunts, even though that's perfectly acceptable in this field, but he's out there doing these crazy things. I think that is a nice mirroring of the character of Maverick in this movie. Now, speaking of the action sequences themselves, first of all, let's set the scene, shall we? So I went to see this movie late at night. It was literally 10 p.m. I went to see this movie at 10:30 p.m. okay, there was barely anyone in the cinema, about 5 other people or so, and I sat myself down at the very middle of the screen of the theater. I had the perfect seat. I was ready. It was a massive screen. I was ready for this because I knew, like, all of the praises that had been sung about this film had something to do with the spectacle of it all and the aerial action sequences. So I wanted to take it all in the best way possible. And guys, I have to tell you, if you are planning on watching this film, you need to do the same. You need to take advantage of the big screen experience, because oh boy, is it an experience. Now, Thomas Cruise has been known, he has been known to really champion the theater going experience, and it makes sense then that he would try and create a film that was truly worthy of that experience by having these incredible action sequences and having all of these incredible visuals and the incredible cinematography to really highlight what can be experienced on the big screen and what really can't be replicated at home on your phone on an iPad. And what I really appreciate about this approach that Thomas Cruise has taken is that, you know, a lot of other filmmakers bemoan about the fact that people aren't going to the theater or the cinema to watch their films anymore. You know, they're only going to see the biggest Marvel or DC superhero spectacle, and the smaller films don't get as much attention by cinema goers or by film fans anymore, and so their box office suffers. And whilst I think this is mostly a resistance to change that we often see in, you know, the old guard in any industry, you know, people oftentimes bemoan changes that don't benefit them anymore, but at the same time I do understand where they're coming from, especially with respect to the smaller films or the mid-range films that have basically disappeared and have been taken over by streaming movies. But what I really appreciate about Thomas Cruise's method here is that instead of just moaning about how streaming movies have taken over the mid-range movie, he has created a film that is unmissable. He has created a film that is just as big of a spectacle, although it doesn't belong to the superhero genre in the traditional sense, and therefore you have to see this on the big screen in order to fully appreciate the visuals here. I feel like a lot of the other filmmakers that are kind of annoyed by this trend that we're seeing in the industry produce films that feel like streaming movies anyway. Like, sir, like, why would I get up out of my house to go see this in the theater anyways? Like, it's not giving 1917. It's not giving Blade Runner 2049. Like, what? Why do you want me to go see this in the cinema anyways? It's an ugly film. But here we have Top Gun Maverick showing the girls how it's done, okay? Showing the girls that you do not need to be a superhero movie to be cinema going worthy, because this film is truly a cinema worthy experience. And finally, I did want to also give some love to the supporting cast of this film. I do think that they were all brilliant. I definitely think that they updated the cast of this movie to reflect, you know, modern times and the kinds of representation that we want to see nowadays. And that was very much appreciated, even though the undertones of the film are still quite traditional, you know, Americana, you know, the guy gets the girl at the end. Like, there are still some of those more antiquated themes playing out here, but at least we have a little bit more representation in the cast to kind of make up for it or balance balance it out. Anyways, going back to the cast itself, first of all, we do have some of the old guard, like the return of Val Kilmer's Iceman. He is mentioned at the beginning of the film, and I wasn't quite sure if we would see him, but then we do. We do get to see him. Now, this was actually a really touching moment. I didn't fully appreciate just how meaningful this moment was in the film until afterwards when I looked into it, and it turns out that Val Kilmer did suffer a throat cancer, and that is a plot point in the movie where he does have cancer, and it has resulted in him not being able to vocalize and to speak because of the damage to his vocal cords. And so they do use this kind of apparatus where he's able to type in what he wants to say, and I think that is used to great effect. It's not used much, they're just like really short but meaningful and impactful sentences, which I think is great. But then they do also give him some speaking lines to give the character a voice, and I think that's a really wonderful and important creative decision that they made. Unfortunately, Val Kilmer's vocal cords are too damaged for him to have been able to deliver those lines directly, but his voice was revived using this kind of technology that has been used before. I believe it's the same one that was used to resurrect Luke Skywalker's voice for Book of Boba Fett. With this technology, they essentially take samples of the actor's voice from various different roles and interviews, and they use an algorithm or some sort. I'm not a techie person either, okay? They use an algorithm to approximate how the actor would sound delivering those lines, and I believe in this case they had like 40 different versions of Val Kilmer's voice, but I think the one that they settled on was a pretty great approximation, and I think it did justice to the character and to the importance and the gravitas of that scene. We also had Jennifer Connelly. Now, I don't know if she was in the original Top Gun or not, or if she's like a new love interest, but it seemed as though she had some history with Maverick and they had a complicated relationship in the past that kind of rekindles in this film. I think they're cute. Like, usually I'm against I'm against Thomas Cruise being in any romantic relationship on screen. I never think it works, you know. Truly, in the Mission Impossible films, when they try to make it happen, I usually cringe, especially that scene with Vanessa Kirby in Mission Impossible 6, I think it was, where he kissed her. I was like, boo. Literally boo. Like, there's just no chemistry. Thomas Cruise has the most chemistry with his craft. Like, he doesn't really have much chemistry with the women on screen. But anywho, I do feel like Jennifer Connelly managed to bring out the sparks of romantic tension there, and I think it did work in this case. So well done to her. Well done to her for making it happen, because that takes talent, okay? Then next up we have some of the new guard, and first one up we have is Miles Teller, who is Goose's son. Again, I didn't watch the first film, so like that doesn't really have much meaning to me. I do have a vague understanding of what happened in the first film though, just based off of the cues, okay, because it is a plot point in this movie as well. But you know, just the idea that, you know, Maverick used to work with Goose, they used to be really close. I think Goose was his wingman, and now we have his son, and Maverick was actually responsible for holding Rooster, I think his name is. Maverick was responsible for holding Rooster back in his career because his mother had begged Maverick not to allow him to go into the same field after what happened to his father. So there was definitely some resentment there, but I do love the way that they kind of, you know, came together in the end. Seeing that redemption arc in the story was really feasible, was really believable. I think Miles Teller did a great job. I can't remember why Miles Teller like disappeared, or why we as a society decided that we didn't like Miles Teller. Like, let me know. Let me know down in the comments. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm his biggest fan, but I think he did a good job in this film. But let me know down in the comments why it was that he kind of just disappeared and became public enemy number 59. Like, and we also have Monica Barbaro, who is the only female pilot in this scheme. She was great, you know, like she was the stereotypical strong girl. Yeah, she can do it, very clever, you know, very outspoken and confident. But I think that's necessary, especially, you know, in a film like this where where it is very male dominated. I liked seeing the female pilot. I don't think there was one in the first Top Gun, so again, it's just that a touch of modernization that the film needed. And then we also have Glenn Powell portraying Hangman, who's this like golden boy. Okay, he thinks he's all that, he's the best of the best, but of course he's selfish. He only looks out for himself. He doesn't care about the rest of his team, and it's Maverick's job to make them a team, you know, to make them feel like they can rely on each other and communicate with each other. But Hangman just doesn't get that, like he doesn't quite understand the assignment, so he's always looking out for himself, and that's obviously something that costs him the opportunity to be a part of this mission. But I do love the fact that by the end of the film he takes it upon himself to save Maverick and Rooster, regardless of, you know, the consequences and any of the glory of the mission, which I think was a really nice character arc for him as well. And we also saw some familiar faces like Danny Ramirez from Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Jay Ellis from Insecure. So yeah, like it was very much a more modernized cast, which I appreciated, and all around they had great chemistry. They all felt like really, you know, hot, attractive pilots working for the American Navy. Again, all part of that kind of image that they want to convey there. But overall, I do think that the cast was great, you know, with some of the old guard in Hollywood and also highlighting some of the new guard as well, which I found really fun. And so guys, with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Top Gun Maverick an 8.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Top Gun Maverick, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this movie down in the comments below. And if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you check it out on the biggest screen that you have available. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.